to have been destroyed of the two talking chimpanzees, Cornelius and Zero, come just from outer space 20 years ago. As such, he constitutes a threat to the future of the whole human race. I mean, as such, he constitutes a threat to the future of the whole human race. Zero and Cornelius, who came to us from outer space 20 years ago. So now we're moving into what would have been, what's his name? What's the villain from the last movie? What's his name?
Hasline.
Hasline. Now we're moving into the fact that Hasline's theories were put out there for them to follow this idea that Zero and Cornelius constituted a threat to the human race. The announcer does not own up to the fact that they were from the future. Mm-hmm. He says they were just from. He just says they're from outer space.
Outer space. He doesn't say the future. He just says outer space.
He says they're from outer space, and as such, constitute a threat to the future of the whole human race. So it's a jumble of information. They came from outer space, but but we're not saying they're from the future. But they were a threat because the progeny creates a threat for the future. You know, see what I'm saying? Like there's the announcer's statement asks the audience to put some logic together. It makes you wonder what story was being told in the press for the last 20 years about who these apes were and what the threat that they had for them was. Because it was never really, they just escaped and got shot and died. There was nothing that really explained why they were a threat to the human race, to the general population.
Well, we even talked about that the last time, that where was the immediate threat just from a talking ape coming there? If you began to do the narrative that, look, their future is because of XYZ and humans become the subordinates to them, then you have a threat. But I mean, nothing immediately says threatening. Again, about speech. Speech is not threatening. It doesn't mean that a malevolent.
Just because you can talk,
right?
Yeah.
Caesar's not going to come out and kill every human. In fact, I think, given the choice and a good situation, Caesar, he had Armando. He would much rather.
Yeah, he wanted to go back to the circus.
Right. He wants to be assimilated. He loved Armando. Armando was his father in many ways. He isn't ready to kill. It would be interesting if that counter narrative were there. If Caesar maybe overheard them saying these things about him, and he was able to give voice to, that's not what I wanted, but that's what you're making me turn to.
Right. And we don't know why this police state exists the way that it exists, and if the Zira and Cornelius story somehow became part of why this 20 years later exists. We know there was the plague that wiped out the animals that then made apes and chimpanzees pets, but we don't know why this is a police state, and why would humans turn to apes and chimpanzees as lovable pets and servants if they were truly afraid of a future that Zira and Cornelius could bring?
Well, we have to have pets because we don't have any dogs and cats anymore.
Yeah. I guess it's like the robot revolution, right? We're afraid of robots taking over in our stories, yet we're willing to let these devices into our houses that will listen in and make predictions and
because
move
they
things
make
along
my
for
lazy
us.
life easier. Thank you.
Right. So that's what it's at that trade-off. Robots and apes.
I look at that, and you make such a compelling argument out of the ape becomes the version of the pet that we love, yet we're terrified of it. I kind of wish that this had been a Moses story of sorts instead, where Breck eventually gets his way and starts killing all the apes. And, Caesar, it does have those elements where Moses has to deliver his people and past it. I just wish they'd touched a bit more into that, because it would have made so much more sense about what Breck's intent, his actions, where they came from were, and what Caesar was doing counter to not what he wanted, but what he was being made to do.
I mean, as great as this movie is in extending the mythos further into the future, that kind of stuff, there's so many really beautiful arguments about society and culture and technology and the future and our fears that could have been really put into this a little bit more. It would have been a little bit of a quieter movie. Maybe that's what they were afraid of, but it would have been fascinating. So the possibilities here are just ripe for even more next level sci-fi as opposed to where we are now.
So something to that point, what you just said there, Richard, and I'm going to jump to something that really hits this, but it's very different, is that on Disney Plus, they put out a wonderful documentary about Howard Ashman. And if you don't know who Howard Ashman was, he was part of the songwriting team behind Little Shop of Horrors and eventually went on to write the music for things like Little Mermaid, etc. Howard Ashman died of AIDS early on in the onset of that virus. What they show in that, really that's interesting here, is that when he helped to create The Little Mermaid, and I am not the biggest Little Mermaid fan, but it's like that song that's up where they walk, up where they run, that whole thing. Jeffrey Katzenberg wanted to cut it because he said, you're making this too quiet. This is a kid's wiggle and get up and go to the bathroom moment. And Howard Ashton was like, no, this song is everything that this movie's about. You have to have it. And I feel like in this movie, to this point, it needed that moment. It needed that, this is what this world's supposed to be. This is where I wanted to go, which goes back to what we're saying about Caesar, and you wish that he could have given voice to these things. This would have been such a more deeply powerful film with just those insertion moments there.
And you would be able to, so long as you had the script there in terms of what they needed to say, it wouldn't require that much budget to do. Like, it wouldn't have been a budget moment. It would have been more like a play. I mean,
you could even done that in a single shot. Roddy McDowall's more than gifted enough to learn that kind of stuff and be able to take us through it. That simple insertion here would have made this, to me, I already love this movie. It's probably, amongst the originals, it's maybe my second, maybe tied for third, second favorite of these films. Man, it might have catapulted it to be one of my favorite if they had done a little bit of work like that.
Yeah.
Sean, you got anything else?
Oh, well, hang on. We haven't talked about the gorillas and what they're doing.
Oh, that's true.
They're grabbing some gas tanks. I mean, and they really aped it up in here. You notice that their hands are very curled in like apes. And when they're going up the stairs, there's one guy that's almost walking on all fours.
And they also made them look rather sweaty. They're very shiny.
Very shiny, yeah.
Which I assume apes sweat. They aren't like dogs where they don't.
Yeah.
Sean, you look up that kind of stuff. Let us know, do apes sweat?
Do apes, hey Google, do apes sweat? Let's see. Yeah, they sweat. Mammals have sweat glands.
Thanks Google.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of like it. They're doing something. They're working. They're scared. They're trying to break free. I like the glistening looks. But you're right. And especially one of the apes that hands his gas can forward to another gorilla. His hand is very curled, and he kind of And I like that.
The ape movement in this particular scene was well done. But here's another
hunched over. Yeah. Here's
another question though. Just to kind of throw the logic of teleportation. Where did these apes come from?
Oh, yeah. I mean, did they break out of ape management and sneak over here somehow? Is this inside ape management? I don't know.
Well, they're back in the washroom. But after the rioting and all the big noise of everything was happening in the riots, we're now back to calm, collected apes just kind of quietly went back to the ape washroom and just picked up the gas cans and walked out, and Caesar's completely totally different. Or is this a completely different group of apes that are now reassembled to get the gas cans out? Like there's a movement choice that doesn't make any sense, because right now that band was leaving ape management and was going out to take over the city. So is this the group of apes minus Caesar, or is this a completely different group of apes that is now assembled to gather the gas cans and take them out?
So I'll get kicked in the balls again, but this is actually where I first noticed the jump cut nature of this filmmaking. And that's significant because this is made in 1972, and this idea of where do they come from, how are they there, you go back and look. Goddard's Breathless comes out in 60, 12 years later, it makes the impact to where we're in this film. Bonnie and Clyde comes out and uses the same technique where people are suddenly just jumping ahead. And if you watch Breathless, it literally has a woman starting out of a building, and then the next cut she's across the street. And so they were using it. I can't help but think that that influence is used here, that they're intentionally popping things around. And that idea of that wave became, we don't necessarily have to see the to and from. I would rather see it. But I do think this is indicative of these times, which that had happened, and it's beginning to affect filmmaking techniques greatly at this time.
If these apes, and I do like the movement, if these apes had been a little bit more like they had just come from a fight, I might have connected those a little disheveled, a little more rushed to get this gasoline, a little more hurriedness to come down and get it. Would make me feel a little more like they just hadn't suddenly been in there quietly walking around.
You know what? We don't know that all the apes were following Caesar to ape management. True. Just in the beginning fight when they went to ape management, we don't know that all the apes were there. He could have had another contingent over here, waiting to you'll get the signal. What's the signal? When ape management burns, then you start burning stuff too.
It would have been nice in this to see Caesar orchestrating the actions of these apes, like taking it next level, that we're putting this fight together. But he's oddly not apparent in this.
Right.
If he's their leader, if he's the one that can not just form the thought, the idea that we can fight back, he's the one leading everything. In fact, he should be giving a speech here. This should be the moment where he's hearing what they're saying about him. And he looks to them and says, you hear what they say. We have to stand up. He needs to give the rah-rah Braveheart speech here. It needs to be something. Instead, it's oddly, that's the thing that hits me more of where do they come from. It's that the apes are just oddly sort of milling about and getting these things.
Yes.
Thank you.
But we now know this minute is going to end with kind of the intention of what's coming next, right? Possibly. That everybody is carrying kerosene. They're about to burn some shit down. They're about to set it on fire. City's gone. No contingent plans. We're just going to tear it down.
With that comment, that's perfect. I'm going to tell us that we have to move ahead because we are approaching the 30-minute mark for this episode. And that's what we try to keep it to, if at all possible. So unless anyone else has anything to chime in with, and I'll take that as a no, we are convened and we are done. We'll be back tomorrow with the last minute for this week, the last time you'll have to hear us try to figure out the differences between our two versions. Until then, everyone, have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
The minute of the ape.